Okay, so we're gonna have some fun today, but first, before the fun happens, you're gonna sit through an actual talk. So, yeah, you gotta pay the price for the fun. So we'll have talk, then some fun, and then even more fun at the after party. I believe someone talked to you about that earlier. I'll be going there, so feel free to follow me. I'll be following someone else who looks like they know where they're going. This morning, you guys heard from Dan and Jason, and it was super fun to see them on stage together. Usually they just like fight and, are all upset at each other, so it was fun to, I'm just kidding, they're good friends. But to talk about kind of where Appium came from, some of the more arcane bits of the history. So I thought I'd kind of bookend it and look ahead to the next 5 years. Dan did talk about his kind of vision for what a more generalized automation framework could look like, and kind of putting the onus of automatability on the platform providers. And I think that's a really great idea, really great long-term vision. Definitely on the same page about where we hope that could go. But I'm going to look a little more practically, kind of strike a little bit of a middle balance in terms of what we're talking about here. So I am currently running my own consulting company, basically all about Appium and mobile automation. So this is something that I just started up a couple months ago. It's been a lot of change in my life recently. I also recently became a parent, so also not sleeping at all, and starting a new business at the same time maybe wasn't the best idea, but it's going really well. So if you're ever in the market for Appium Consulting, you talk to me. Of course, I've been involved with the Appium project since the beginning. I have a few photos of that I'm going to show you guys, but still very involved with the project and try and review code and commit code and stay up to date, and very grateful that other folks like Isaac or other maintainers and contributors have stepped in a really big way and are working on it a lot. And that's not just me anymore. Speaking of that, since this is the first AppiumConf, I really wanted to just pause for a moment and recognize the work, the contributions that have gone into Appium over the years. And people like myself often get a lot of recognition. I'm super visible and super outspoken, and I do things like I do spectacles sometimes involving robots and music. So, it gets a lot of attention. But on the other hand, at the end of the day, I was paid by my employer to do all these things. So that I felt really good about that. I felt very grateful about that. But there are people out there who are contributing to Appium just because it's something that they're passionate about. And I think, if anything, that deserves a lot more recognition. So I just wanted, for anyone in the room who has ever contributed anything to any of the Appium repositories, whether it was a documentation enhancement or a bug fix or a big feature, like Daniel talked about this morning, please just stand up right now. I know that there are a number of you, so go ahead and stand up. Wow, that was awesome. Let's give everyone a round of applause, please. Yeah. Thank you so much for making Appium what it is, and giving me an opportunity to come and keep doing these kinds of things, which I love to do. So thank you. So we had kind of the history this morning, but just from my perspective, a little bit of a recap of what I think made Appium successful in its first 5 years of life, so that we can kind of think about what will continue to make it successful moving forward. This is one of the only pictures I could find in my photo library of SeleniumConf 2012, where Appium was introduced. I had joined Sauce Labs about a month before this, and you could tell I didn't quite know what was going on with any of this whole business. So I was very confused, but it was in London. I was having a good time. I recognized the Selenium logo, and I knew how to, make shapes with hot sauce bottles. So that's basically what I did at the conference. I was a booth worker for Sauce Labs, and sometimes would sleep under the booth table because I was jet lagged. And then this whole Appium thing happened, and here I am. So you can go from sleeping under a booth table to being on stage if you really want. So that was kind of my first introduction to kind of the power, kind of just the visceral excitement of seeing mobile devices being automated with Dan's demo back then. Another kind of really fun moment is when we released Appium 1.0, and this I think was May of 2014. So quite a while since the initial ideas came out. This was at the Sauce Labs headquarters in San Francisco, and it's very hard to see in the image because it wasn't taken very well, but there's actually a mobile website being automated by Appium, and we released Appium 1.0 using Appium. So I wrote a web application to publish Appium, and then I had Appium automate that web application and hit the button to make it all go, and then you could see we had this several hundred line bash script that built and released Appium at the time, and so you could watch it doing its thing. And I look like I'm smiling, but I'm really going like, please work, please work, please work, and it did. So that was pretty awesome, and we had several of the kind of earlier Appium maintainers and contributors. Dan was living in San Francisco at the time. There was a guy named Matthew Edwards who put in a lot of effort for the community, and another guy named Dan as well. So it was fun to kind of have a big party and celebrate the release of Appium 1.0. And we've certainly come a long way since then. So what have been some of the crucial milestones, in my opinion, for Appium, and why we're still around 5 years later when a lot of the technology that was around in 2012 is no longer here? Well, it wasn't really a hard decision for those of us who were, working at Sauce Labs and steeped in kind of the WebDriver, Kool-Aid and all that kind of stuff. But we really went all in with WebDriver, and I think that is a big part of Appium's success. It really turns some people off, and it's really not the best for every single use case. But it's where we decided to go, and I think that was a really good decision for us. We had our choice of language. Dan started out in C#, right? And then it was in Python for a while. Python, then C#, then Python. So I came in and was like, this nonsense has to stop. We should use a language that was invented to, make banners move across a web page, to write a mobile automation server. So, that obviously made a lot more sense. But looking back, I'm still very pleased with this choice because JavaScript, while everyone hates it and it should be hated and reviled for many reasons, it's a language that doesn't really scare people. And we could have gone the Java route like Selenium did, but there are just so many people for whom that would have been a huge barrier to entry in terms of contributing to the project. And so while no one is really that good at writing JavaScript, everyone is good enough that they can hack something together, and then we can work with them on it. So I think that was a really good choice. Some people are still quite angry that we did this, but it hasn't stopped us so far. All of the initial work around the whole Appium idea, the host perform task with arguments, timeout hack that you learned about this morning, that was all related to iOS. And so that was the kind of first problem that Appium was developed to solve. But we knew from the beginning it needed to be multi-platform. And so when we actually took that step, and I'm not a Java developer, but I made our first Android driver. There weren't separate drivers at the time; it was just all built in. But I made this thing by just reading the UI Automator docs and using the autocomplete in my IDE, and all of a sudden we had an Android support for Appium, and that really proved to the world that this was a thing which had legs, and it wasn't just going to be this one little tool which people could use, but it had this broader vision. And so we took that vision to the the Google Test Automation conference, I think in 2013 must have been, and kind of announced this new cross-platform automation tool, and that's when people really started to notice. So that was kind of the first stake in the ground of this new territory of we're going to do this cross-platform thing. And not in the way that Calabash did it with different APIs and things like that, but hey, we have this one WebDriver API. We did engage in some intense worldwide evangelism. Luckily, Dan and I both liked to travel and go around and make fools of ourselves in front of groups like this, and so we did a lot of that. And most of the times, the lab demos worked and were impressive, and sometimes they didn't. And we had a grand old time telling the world about Appium. And it got a lot of people to try it. It honestly probably wasn't the best tool. It's probably still not the best tool, but it got a lot of people interested. And open source projects often forget about marketing and that whole side of things, but it's very important. It's very important to have a brand and a message and all this kind of stuff. And we really tried to incorporate that into the work that we were doing. And maybe we did more of that than the actual development that we should have been doing. So it all got coded up eventually. Another huge milestone, this is now much closer to the modern area, is when we actually, once again tore out all the code and started from scratch, this time keeping the same language, but we modernized the way that we were writing JavaScript. We modernized the architecture of Appium. We made things a lot more sane because we really saw that we needed drivers to be kind of more like a plugin type of thing. We needed other people to be able to write and maintain their own drivers in an easy way and to share code and all that kind of stuff. So that's really what's enabled Appium to expand the last 2 years or so into the proliferation of drivers that has happened. Another big milestone for any open source project is a transition to true kind of nonprofit community ownership. Because it's one thing for an open source project to be community driven, and it's another thing for it to be community owned. And this is one of the things that I think really speaks very highly of Sauce Labs, that they really put their money where their mouth was. When we had developed it, we always meant for it to be truly open source and how we are running it. But then we gave the copyright away to a nonprofit foundation to kind of hold in this neutral territory where the whole industry that was involved with Appium could contribute without fear of any kind of competitive stuff getting in the way. And that was really the right thing for the project, and I'm really thankful that Sauce Labs was able to make that call. And here we are today, and the JS Foundation has been a great home for Appium and provided a lot of support for different aspects of the project. And then I think another really key contributor to Appium's success is that so many cloud providers offer first-class support for it. When you are inevitably kind of moving to the cloud for scaling up your mobile automation, you want choices. And some of the other tools that have been discussed today, apart from Appium, don't necessarily have that same breadth of choice when it comes to cloud provider. And that's really important, especially for larger companies. And it helps foster a competition on the things that really matter to differentiate these services from each other, not on kind of the fundamental underlying automation technology, which can, we hope to become a standard. And in some ways, Appium is a standard, but we hope for it to become even more of a standard moving forward. So that's the first 5 years. And what's the vision that's going to drive us into the next 5 years? It's actually very simple, and it's maybe not as exciting as a lot of people think it might be. It kind of reminds me of Selenium's vision in a way, which was to cease existing. And I think that the Selenium project, as Jason talked about this morning, wanting to move the responsibility for the automation tech into the vendors themselves is great. Then the heavy lifting is really done by a standard, which is owned by the community, and it's just this abstract standard. And then other, various people can implement the standard, and as long as they're conforming to the standard, then everyone's happy. And there's no more need for this, special project called Selenium to do its thing. It's just the way the world works. Kind of like when you release a web browser, it has to render a web page in kind of a certain way. Otherwise, it's not really a web browser, and you can't really call it that. And so it would be cool if automation worked the same way. So we do hope that the new W3C protocol that's been produced will have room for expansion into some of the concepts which are necessary for mobile automation. I mean, we can talk about IoT and VR and all these other kinds of automation, but I think starting with mobile is a good idea. It's concrete. We understand it pretty well at this point. Some of the differences between mobile automation and web automation and ways that we could extend or generalize the W3C WebDriver spec to incorporate mobile behaviors and endpoints, because that's essentially what we've been doing with Appium for the last several years. I do think that Appium should continue to maintain a set of code libraries which make it easy to write things that plug into Appium, whether that's new drivers to support new automation technology or some custom in-house driver. Rue earlier today was talking about making a Unity driver, and it happened to be in Python. But one of our goals for the Appium project is, if you choose Node.js and if you choose to make an Appium driver for your automation technology, you get a bunch of stuff for free. You get the protocol for free. You get an HTTP server that has all the endpoints attached to it for free, all that kind of stuff, so that you can just extend a base class, kind of the way that Daniel was giving code examples of this morning. And then we do want to maintain different drivers. We want to maintain the kind of best driver for any given platform which is sufficiently popular. So iOS and Android, of course, are very popular. They're the most popular platforms, so we want to maintain a kind of best-in-class iOS automation driver and a best-in-class Android automation driver. But these things will kind of change over time as the underlying technology evolves, and so we'll have to kind of always be making a judgment call about which technology to support and build a driver on top of and really maintain and put our energy behind. And that's an awful lot of effort and requires an awful lot of expertise in Android or in iOS, or in the specific technologies pertaining to those platforms. But what we hope is that on top of that shifting landscape of mobile technology is a stable API in the form of basically WebDriver plus some extensions plus a sort of incubation, a set of incubating features which we don't necessarily know how to expose yet, but once people use, we'll figure it out, kind of thing. And then I think it's really important to include in the notion of Appium itself this community that's in this room, that's watching these talks on YouTube, that's using Appium. There are a lot of people who are doing that, and as I learned a bunch of stuff today from various talks, things I didn't know you could do, things that are sparking ideas. Maybe we could bring that into Appium. So there's so much knowledge that's held within the community. Some of it's shared. I'm trying to codify some of that in the Appium Pro newsletter, which I've started this year and have been really working hard on. But then just getting people to talk to each other is really, really important. So that's the Appium vision. This is where we are today with our drivers. You can see it is ever expanding. I'm just putting this up here to kind of show that the vision is sort of on its way, but we hope that this expands, and also that things which need to die or be weeded out will no longer show up on the slide as time goes on too. So what are my hoped for milestones in the next 5 years? Well, I hope that a mobile vendor like Google or Apple might include Appium or a WebDriver compatible thing as a first-class automation framework. Maybe not their preferred one. I don't know. Maybe they release it alongside of an existing one. Only Google would do that, so maybe we put our hope in them. I think we need more driver-level maintainers. So there are some people right now who really understand the different drivers and how WebDriver agent works and how XUI test works and all that kind of stuff. But we need more of those kind of people, especially as the set of drivers expands. We need people who really go deep into specific drivers and choose to become maintainers of those drivers. Appium does have a reputation for being slow and unstable. I think there's a lot to talk about there, but we need to make sure that we're building on the most solid, most fast, and most stable technology, and that Appium isn't introducing any instability of its own. As I mentioned, actually concretely sometime in the next 5 years, getting some official extension to the W3C spec. Maybe it's not put out by the W3C. Maybe it's just like the Selenium project and the Appium project all agree on it, and anyone who comes along in the future has to agree on it too. I don't know how it'll look, but something that where we put a stake in the ground. We need to have an Appium 2.0 release. I have other talks about what Appium 2.0 looks like that you can look up. I think the one from AppiumConf 2016 is a good one to look up, but that just kind of makes managing all the different drivers a lot easier for you guys. And then generally to see not a continued expansion of all different kinds of mobile technology, but a kind of convergence on what the best technologies are. And we hope that Appium will play a role in that by convincing people that sort of adhering to one standard is more beneficial than the alternative. How do we get there concretely? Someone asked the question earlier today, what about Appium for IoT? And it's something I've been thinking about a fair amount. But IoT is, as Hugs pointed out, is such a broad concept. It could mean a lot of different things. And I think what's really necessary, somebody like me could sit down and dream up what it should look like, but I'm not in a position of having to test an IoT app. Dan Quera was in the position of having to test an iOS app, and he's like, this sucks. What can I do to make it better? So we need the people who are in those positions to say, this sucks, what can I do to make it better? Because they're in a concrete place. They'll be able to actually know what needs to be done. And that will be a place that we can start from and expand from. So it's always best to start with a concrete example, at least for me. And I think that that's what we need for these kind of next generation automation technologies, not for a person like myself to just write a driver because I think that, a VR driver should work this way. No, it needs to be somebody who has the role of testing a VR app, who's familiar with Appium, who sees a way to marry those concepts or bridge those concepts. I hope that our community continues to grow and that our community continues to make a lot of noise, to the next point as well, to folks like Google and Apple, so that they add features to their automation technology based on what the Appium community needs. Who are they listening to when they're building their test automation tools? Hopefully at some point it's actually us. And then again, I'll keep saying this, more contributors and maintainers. So that's all of you. Thanks to those of you who've already contributed. Those of you who haven't, just talk to anyone who has. It's actually a super easy process. We're very friendly. We don't just reject your code and tell you you're a horrible person. Except Dan's JavaScript is really bad. But okay, so now we're done with the talk. Now you know kind of what we're hoping for in the next 5 years on kind of a high level. But I wanted to just have a little bit of fun. This is AppiumConf. This is the first AppiumConf, and I wanted to do something a bit special. And I know how much everyone's really enjoyed the time when I played guitar and had Appium play some music. So we're going to do something very similar today. So I'm going to start getting that set up and try and talk about what's happening. So I have, what do I have here? I've got a Samsung thing, this thing. I won't dignify it with calling it a phone, but it is an object. And I'm going to close Keynote because I need all of the CPU that I can get for this not to totally suck. And let's see. Do I have the Android viewer up? Yes, I do. Let's put that like here. Oh yeah, 1 second. I need my instrument. So here's my ukulele. Plug it in. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is humanity. And, robots are really great, and obviously I love to play with robots and make art with robots. But, I like to think about things on a philosophical level, and despite the fact that we're all automation engineers and spend a lot of time roboticizing things, I think it's important never to roboticize ourselves, turn ourselves into robots. We want to, create technology which enables us to be more human, not form ourselves into the restrictive image of whatever technology we are able to create right now. So I wrote a little song about that in the sort of genre of that I've been working with, of dystopian, techno-futuristic irony or something like that. So I'm going to play the song, and I'm going to have Appium play some instruments to back me up, assuming that's set up. And it's mostly in tune, okay? Let's try it. And right. So Appium is now starting up all the things. I'm going to try and play along and sing for you guys. Yeah, and that's the real device. Oh, shoot. Let's put it here. I can't hear anything. I need sound. Where's the sound? Not coming out from here? Did we plug it in? Well, it started. But we need the drums too. Where's the drums? Is it not? What about the computer input? I can probably start it again. You guys are getting a sneak preview of the bass part. So yeah, it seems like it's not coming out of the computer like it was before.
That's what it's doing.
Oh, yeah.
Try that.
Okay. Now probably everything is broken. Let's just quit everything and then restart it and then pretend. I like to delete WebDriver agent as a sort of magical good luck charm. Android, you're good. That's good. Let's give that one a go again. Time. Deleted the session. That should be fine. Okay. Oops. That and the iPhone simulator. Android, what you doing? There you go. Let's see if we get some drum sound to lead us in here. Here we go. Now I believe things I've heard, those that said I'm better served scanning my whole brain, going digital. So now that man is dead and gone, and here I am still humming along, but I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. And feeling was the first to go. I never thought I'd stoop so low, but now I want my body back. Its limits seem a welcome fact. I'm hailed a virtual deity, still no good at being me. I am the ghost in the machine, god of everything I see, but in my new reality, eyes are a rare commodity. I don't just wanna be a brain, I want to be a human being, but my mind's stuck in silicon and I'm stuck inside my mind. 'Cause I am the perfect simulation of the not so perfect person that I was. I am the perfect simulation of that not so perfect person that I was. So won't you get me out of here? I have saved of sun and trees. The one thing that I cannot do is feel them like they're mine. And feeling was the first to go. I never thought I'd stoop so low, but now I want my body back. Its limits seem a welcome fact. I'm hailed a virtual deity, but still no good at being me. I am the ghost in the machine, god of everything I see, but in my new reality, eyes are a rare commodity. I don't just wanna be a brain, I want to be a human being, but my mind's stuck in silicon and I'm stuck inside my mind. And I am the perfect simulation of the not so perfect person that I was. Yeah, I am the perfect simulation of the not so perfect person that I was. So won't you get me out of, won't you get me out of here? Da 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 da. Yeah. All right. Wow, that kind of worked. That's invigorating. And you know it's a live demo because it kind of didn't work at the beginning. So live demos are always fun. So let's talk a little bit just I know I'm over time, but about what was going on here, because there was a lot. Where's my talk? Right, so we had 6 instruments total. Well, no, 5 instruments. We had drums, electric guitars, bass, my ukulele, me singing, and then there was lyrics being shown, sort of in time with the words. So Appium was controlling, Appium and Selenium actually. I was trying to be, expansive, big tent and everything. So the lyrics were being handled by Appium. The drums and guitars, lyrics were being handled by Chrome, so that was by Selenium. Drums and guitars were being handled by a web application that I made that was just a sampler, basically using the web audio API. So you just tap a button and it plays a WAV file. And I had actually recorded electric guitars as the electric guitar part and sampled essentially each measure and given each of those sounds its own little button that you could press. So Appium wasn't playing every single guitar note, it was playing a measure at a time or a chord at a time that I just recorded at home and then sliced up. And then Appium was also controlling that little the app on the Android you guys saw. It was a little keyboard app, and I'd had a crappy bass MIDI sound or something that was coming out of it playing the bass part. And this was all sort of schematized in a sort of musical notation, a digital format of a musical notation essentially, and routed into a director process whose job it was to kind of fan out these different musical parts to the appropriate Appium or Selenium server and make sure that the timing is all working. And it's actually really hard to get timing to work so that it actually sounds even remotely musical. This is really hard. I don't know if it looks that hard, but it's really hard. And there's a lot of things that you can't do. Like, there are a lot of ways I tried to make things work, parts that I thought were more interesting, but it just wasn't fast enough. I couldn't do 16th notes. Even swinging 8th notes for a song like this was pretty difficult. So yeah, once you get to the other side of the Selenium and Appium servers, everything's probably pretty familiar to you guys. You've got the apps that are being automated. It's coming out of various outputs. So just to kind of give you a sense of what the musical notation looked like, here's a portion of the score for the bass part. So I've highlighted, it's just the verse, so it's in the key of B, and those are pitches and timings, basically. And so I split up the song into parts, just like you do when you're writing music. This isn't unique to code or Appium or anything. And then I just concatenate all the parts, and then that gets fed into the director process, which shoots the right Appium server, the right things to tap on to correspond with the correct pitch, and then waits the correct amount of time before doing it again to kind of simulate an instrument playing a note for the right amount of time. And then this is what kind of the main entry point looks like. I'm just instantiating specific instruments which know how to turn notes into Appium commands, essentially. I'm feeding them into the director, and then I'm having the director assemble the musicians, assemble the band, play the song, and then let them all go home when it's over. Or if something goes wrong in the middle, they just go home. They don't come back and play. So thought you would find it interesting to see Appium being used for, again, something completely frivolous, but as Dan was kind of talking about this morning, it's sometimes these very frivolous things that give us a sense of the limits of a tool or what you can do with it, or give you creative ideas. And anyway, art, is worth it even if it's frivolous. We should all be making and doing things which are frivolous regardless. So as a special gift for all of you guys, actually have a studio version of that song that I recorded with actual decent instruments, and I think it sounds pretty effing rad. So if you go to this URL, it'll redirect you to SoundCloud, and you can listen to the song. And I thought it would be fun just to take away from the conference, have a memory of this day that we all shared together in this crazy world of Appium that we're all in. So thank you very much.